You open your mouth and nothing comes out. You understood the question perfectly. You even know the answer. But somewhere between your brain and your mouth, the words just disappear. If that sounds familiar, you are definitely in the right place.
And honestly, that feeling is way more common than people think. It doesn't mean you're bad at English, it means you're missing one specific thing. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to Let's Talk Real English, the podcast where we have real conversations about learning and using English in the real world. I'm Lara.
And I'm Eric. So, okay, let's just jump right into it because I feel like this topic, every learner has been there.
And look, if you've ever said to someone, I understand English, but I can't speak it, first of all, that is a real thing. It's not an excuse. There's actual science behind why this happens. And once you understand why, you can start to fix it.
So, let's start with something that actually makes a lot of learners feel better, at least a little bit. The fact that you understand English but struggle to speak it, that's completely normal, and there's a real reason for it.
Right, so the basic idea is this. When you learn a language, your brain develops two separate skills. There's input, that's listening and reading, and then there's output, that's speaking and writing. And they are not the same skill.
Yeah, and the thing is, input always comes first. Always. Think about babies, right? They listen for months, sometimes over a year, before they say a single word, because they're building up this huge library of sounds and words and patterns.
And look, for adult learners, it's the same idea. You've spent hundreds of hours listening, watching, reading, so your brain has gotten really good at recognizing English. Recognizing it.
But recognition is not the same as production. Like, I can recognize a beautiful piece of music, right? That doesn't mean I can sit down and play it on the piano.
That's a great way to put it. So when people say, my listening is so much better than my speaking, yes, of course it is, because you've trained your listening way more than your speaking. It makes complete sense.
So let's break this down even further, because I think when most people describe this problem, they think it's a confidence issue. And yes, confidence plays a role, but it's much more specific than that. It's really about what type of practice you've been doing.
And that's the thing. The honest truth is that most traditional language learning, it doesn't train speaking. It trains recognition, reading comprehension, multiple choice, fill in the gap. None of that makes your mouth move.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, because most people think the gap is about vocabulary or grammar, right? Like, I just need to learn more words and then I'll be able to speak. But it's not completely wrong, but it's missing the bigger picture.
Because speaking isn't just a knowledge skill, it's a physical skill.
Wait, say more about that, because I think that's something people really don't realize.
So think about it this way. When you speak, you're not just pulling words from your memory. Your mouth, your tongue, your lips, your jaw, all of these muscles are doing very specific, very fast movements. And those muscles need training.
Like any other muscle.
Exactly like any other muscle. If you want to run a marathon, knowing everything about running, the technique, the strategy, the breathing, none of that prepares your legs. Your legs need to actually run over and over.
So, language knowledge and speaking ability, they're connected, but they're not the same thing. You can know a lot and still not be able to speak fluently because your mouth hasn't practiced.
And this is the missing step that nobody talks about enough. People study grammar tables, they memorize vocabulary lists, and then they're surprised when the words don't come out smoothly in a real conversation. But you haven't trained your speaking muscles. You've trained your studying muscles.
No, but seriously, that's such a good point. And I think it also explains why even very advanced learners, people with like C1 level grammar knowledge, sometimes struggle to have a basic, spontaneous conversation because they've been studying, not speaking.
And that's the thing. Knowledge lives in your head. Speaking ability lives in your mouth. And you can't transfer one to the other just by studying more.
And you know what's interesting? Sometimes people actually get more frustrated as they improve because their understanding goes way up, but their speaking, it doesn't keep pace. So they feel like they're getting worse when they're actually just getting better at one specific thing.
So true. That's a really important point. The gap can actually feel wider the more you learn because your ear becomes more refined, right? You can hear every mistake you make, but your mouth hasn't caught up yet.
Okay, so let's dig into this a little more because I want to understand why exactly does English get stuck in your head? Like what's actually happening when you try to speak and it just doesn't come?
So there are a few things going on at the same time. The first one is translation. A lot of learners, especially at the B1, B2 level, they still think in their native language and then translate into English. And that process, it takes time. It creates a delay.
And in a real conversation, you don't have time for that delay.
No, completely. By the time you've finished translating in your head, the conversation has already moved on. So you either say nothing or you say something that feels late, off. And that makes you feel worse about your English, even though the problem isn't really your English.
I think the second thing is fear, like fear of making mistakes. Because in school, mistakes were bad. You got them marked in red. So your brain starts self editing before you even open your mouth.
And that self-editing, it freezes you because you're trying to build the perfect sentence while also listening to the other person while also managing your nerves. That's just too many things at once.
Too many things at once, yeah. And I think there's also this thing where people have very low tolerance for uncertainty in a second language. Like in their native language, they're totally okay saying something imperfect. But in English, they want to be sure before they speak.
And that certainty, it never really comes. You're waiting to feel ready, but feeling ready is actually a result of practicing, not a precondition for it.
And then there's a third one, and I think the technical term for it is automaticity, the ability to do something automatically without thinking about every step.
Right, automaticity. So when a native speaker says, I've been thinking about it, they don't stop and think present perfect continuous, subject, auxiliary verb. They just say it because they've said that phrase thousands of times.
But for a learner, every single phrase might still require conscious thought, and conscious thought is slow.
Slow and exhausting. And that leads to the fourth thing, limited speaking repetitions. Most learners just haven't spoken English enough. They've read thousands of sentences, but they've spoken maybe hundreds or even less.
And repetition is literally how you build automaticity. So it's kind of a cycle, right? You don't speak because it's hard, and it stays hard because you don't speak.
Someone once described this to me like they said learning English felt like watching a race from the stands. They understood everything that was happening. They could predict the next move. But the moment they tried to run themselves, completely different experience.
That's it. That's the perfect analogy. Watching is not the same as doing. And your brain knows this, but sometimes your ego doesn't want to accept it.
Exactly. And that's why you have to break that cycle. The way you break it is by doing the thing that scares you, which is speaking.
And I know what you're probably thinking right now. Okay, but how exactly? Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
So the first technique, and I love this one, is shadowing. You take an audio or a video in English, something at your level, and you listen and repeat at the same time, not after, at the same time as the speaker.
Okay, so let's get practical because I know that's what everyone is waiting for. What do you actually do? Like, how do you train your mouth?
So you're basically copying the speaker in real time.
For sure. And what that does is train your mouth to make the sounds and rhythms of English at natural speed. You're not just learning what to say, you're training how to say it, the actual physical movements of the mouth.
But wait, is that actually realistic for beginners? Like, won't they just fall behind immediately?
That's a fair point. And honestly, at first, you probably will fall behind. But that's kind of the whole idea. You pause, you rewind, you try again. Even 10 seconds of keeping up trains your mouth more than reading the same line ever could.
That makes sense. The second technique is reading aloud. And I know it sounds simple, but honestly, people underestimate it. When you read aloud, you're forcing your mouth to form English sounds in sequence. You're building that physical memory. that muscle memory.
And it works because you're not thinking about meaning as much. You're focused on the sound, so your brain can kind of relax and just copy.
And you can do it with anything: a news article, a book, a podcast transcript. Even 5 minutes a day makes a real difference if you do it consistently over time.
I actually tested this on myself once, just 10 minutes of reading aloud every morning for a week. By day 4, I noticed I was stumbling less, pausing less. My cat was deeply unimpressed, but my delivery felt noticeably more fluid.
The third thing is repeating short phrases. So instead of trying to build long, perfect sentences from scratch, you collect short phrases that you can actually use. Things like, "That's a good point. I was just thinking about that. To be honest with you." You drill them until they feel automatic.
Because the goal is automaticity, right? You want those phrases to just appear without thinking. And once you have a library of automatic phrases, real conversation feels so much less scary.
Yes, and the fourth technique is thinking in English. So this one takes time, but the idea is you start to catch yourself when you're translating and you try to just think directly in English, even if it's really simple. "I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? Maybe I'll make pasta."
You start small. You don't need to have deep philosophical thoughts in English on day 1.
100%. And then the fifth, and probably the most important, is just actual conversation practice. Real conversations, even short ones, with a teacher, a language partner, an app. The goal is to get your mouth moving in English in response to real, unpredictable input.
Because that's what a real conversation demands. You can't plan it. You can't prepare the perfect sentence in advance. You have to respond. And that responsiveness is the skill you're actually building.
And look, your first conversations are going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to pause, you're going to make mistakes. You might forget a word right in the middle of a sentence. That's okay. That's not failure. That's the training.
And one more thing I want to add. Don't try to practice everything at once. Pick a context. Maybe you practice speaking about your job, or your hobbies, or your daily routine. Get comfortable in that small area first. That confidence spreads into other areas naturally.
For sure, like build a home base in English. Start with the conversations you already know you'll need to have. And once those feel comfortable, expand from there. You don't have to be fluent everywhere at once.
So let's bring it all together, because I think there's a really important mindset shift here. A lot of learners judge their speaking ability by what they know. I know this grammar rule. I know this vocabulary, so why can't I speak? But that's the wrong measure.
Right. The right question is not, "What do I know?" It's, "What have I practiced saying?" Because those are two very different things, and only one of them predicts how you'll do in a real conversation.
Understanding English builds your knowledge, but speaking English builds your skill. And knowledge without practice, it stays in your head. It doesn't come out of your mouth.
And I want to say something to anyone who's been learning English for a long time and still feels stuck. You are not behind. You have been building a foundation this whole time, a really solid one. And now it's time to add the final layer, the speaking practice.
Think of it like this. You've been filling up a tank of English for years. You've got all this knowledge inside you. Now it's time to open the tap. And yes, at first it comes out a little slow, a little uneven, but it's there. You just have to let it out.
So the takeaway is this: don't wait until your English is perfect to start speaking. Start speaking so that your English can become perfect. The mouth learns by doing.
I love that. The mouth learns by doing. Okay, so your homework, and yes, we are giving you homework, is to pick one technique from today. Just one. Shadowing, reading aloud, repeating short phrases, thinking in English, or having a real conversation. And do it for just 5 minutes today.
5 minutes, that's it. You can do 5 minutes. And if you do it again tomorrow and the day after, that's how fluency is built. Not in a classroom, in your mouth.
Thank you so much for listening to Let's Talk Real English. If this episode was useful to you, share it with a friend who's learning English. They probably feel the exact same way. We'll be back next week with another honest conversation about what it really takes to speak English.
Until then, keep speaking, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. See you next time.